Hi and welcome. In this video we're going to be talking about adjustments, and in particular the hue and saturation adjustment. Now the hue and saturation adjustment lets you adjust the hue, the saturation and the lightness of a specific range of colours in an image, or simultaneously all the colours in an image. Well, lightness is pretty self-explanatory, but what are hue and saturation? Well, hue is a colour, so blue is a hue, green is a hue, red is a hue. Hue is a generic description of any colour in your image, and it's controlled in the colour picker by this vertical slider here. So the hues are all these different colours in this slider, and we just move the slider up and down to pick a particular hue. Now saturation is how vibrant are the colours in an image. Now they can range from very dull colours to very intense ones. And if we look at the colour picker here, we can see that the saturation is controlled by moving horizontally within the colour picker. So once we've picked a hue, we click and we can drag horizontally to change the saturation from very saturated over here on the right hand side to basically grey or no saturation at all on the left hand side. Now lightness is controlled by moving vertically within the colour picker. So here if we move vertically we get lighter, if we move vertically down we get darker. Now this is a very powerful adjustment and I'm really excited to be telling you about it, so let's dig in. My name is Ken Fisher and this is LiveLink Training. Okay, so how can I apply a hue and saturation adjustment layers? Well, we can apply it in several different ways. I'm going to show you the method of working non-destructively. So we're going to be using a hue and saturation adjustment layer. And we can find that in several different places. The first one is in the adjustments panel itself. And if we click this little icon here, you'll see it says hue and saturation, and it's going to create a new hue and saturation adjustment layer. Now we can choose it from the layer menu as another option. We can go to layer and new adjustment layer, and we've got hue and saturation down here. Or we can go to the bottom of the layers panel and we can click this little black and white yin and yang icon down here, and when we hold it down we get again the adjustment layers, and we can see that here we've got again the hue and saturation adjustment layer. Now, as I said earlier, these are adjustment layers. These are totally non-destructive. Now, you can have a destructive workflow. And by destructive, I mean if we go to the image menu and go to adjustments, here we have all these adjustments. But these are applied directly to the image. They are what's called destructive. They physically change the pixel numbers. So you cannot get back. If you close Photoshop down and then reopen it after you've made one of these adjustments, it can be very difficult and sometimes impossible to get back to the original image. Whereas with the adjustment layers, as we'll see, these sit above the layer on their own layer, and these can be removed, changed at will. So it's a totally non-destructive workflow that we're going to be looking at. Okay, let's have a look at adding a hue and saturation adjustment layer. And I'm going to do that by this method where I showed you earlier. I'm going to go down to the bottom of the layers panel. I'm going to click and hold down on this little black and white yin and yang icon, and I'm going to go down and click on hue and saturation. And you'll see now that the hue and saturation adjustment layer appears. Now this layer is in two parts. The first part is this one. So if I click on this side, this little icon here, this is the adjustment, and in the properties panel here you'll see that all the adjustment what you can do with the adjustment, they all appear. If I click on this side, on the white area here, this is the mask, and you'll see now I've got the properties of the mask. Now it's important to know the difference and which one's active. So at the moment the mask is active because it's got this double line round the outside. So if I now click on this little icon, I've now got the adjustment, and we can see that by this little line around the outside again. And here now we've got all the stuff we can do. Well, let's have a look in the hue and saturation panel itself. Well, if we look here, we can choose that we're going to adjust either all the colours, which is we'd select master, or we can select a range of colours, or there is actually some presets. So we can click on this one and we can select from a set of presets. There's cyanotype, there's old style, there's red boost. There's quite a few in there that are presets. And then of course we've got as hue and as saturation and as lightness sliders. We've then got a colorized little button that we'll be looking at later, where you can actually add a single color to an image. And then we've got the single selection, the add to selection, or the subtract from selection. And then down at the bottom here we've actually got the color wheel, which at the moment is set because we've actually made no adjustments yet. So let's make an adjustment. Well, we can do that by typing numbers into these boxes, or we can just click and drag the slider. So if I click and drag this slider, the hue slider, you can see that all the colours are changing. So what's happening there? Well, if you look at these two colour bars at the bottom, this top bar is what the colours were to start with, and this bottom bar is where they've been moved to, because we are, by moving the hue slider, we're moving the colours round the colour wheel. So basically what it's saying is anything that was blue in the image is now going to be green. Anything that was red in the image is now going to be blue. And you can see this happening because in this here we had a lot of warm tones, and they were reds and yellows, and they've now been mapped to blue. And you can see anything that was red is now coming out a bluey colour. So this is moving and rotating the hue. Now I'll just set that back to 0. And the second slider, and again we can, any of these, we don't have to use the slider. If you want to be more precise, we could type a figure in here, but I'll use the sliders for ease. And what we can do is with the saturation slider, if we move it to the right, we'll make all the colours more saturated. And if we move the slider to the left, we'll make the colours less saturated. And in fact, if we go right down to -100, we have a black and white, a grayscale image. Okay, we'll set that back to 0. And then the third slider is the lightness. And the lightness slider, again, and it gives you an indication on the sliders that we've got, it goes from light to dark. So here we can make the image lighter, or we can make the image overall darker. So I'll set that back to 0. And then finally we've got the colorize button. And if I just click on that, what it will do is give a one colour over the image. So it will create a monotone image with just one colour. And that colour is defined by where these sliders are now. So we can move the hue slider and say over to, let's say, the yellows. And then we can move the saturation slider, put a bit more saturation in. I'll put a little bit of lightness in, and then I'll play with the hue again. I'd like this just to be a sepia tone look. So there we go, we've got something like that. We can see that at the bottom we've got a one monotone colour, which overall gives the appearance of a sepia tone look to the image. Okay, I'm going to go back to my colour version now by unticking the colorize box. And now I'm going to show you that there is an actual way we can affect the colours. We can change the hue and the saturation actually from the image. And to do that, we've got this little tool up here called the On Image Adjustment tool. And if I click on it, I get like a little eyedropper. Now if I go into my image anywhere I want and I click and drag, you'll see that I will change the saturation. That is so cool. And now if I want to change the hue, if I hold the command key down or the control key on Windows, I can click and drag and I can change the hue. Is that not quick? That is really good. So basically, if I just click and drag, I change the saturation. If I hold the command key down or the control key on Windows, I can click and drag and change the hue. The lightness slider, well, you don't use that much anyway, to be honest, but you go in and you can click and move that around yourself. Now we can basically change a specific set of colours. You can see now that I've clicked in the image that it's gone down and picked the yellows. And these are the other colour ranges that we can pick. but Photoshop has seen where I've picked and it said, well, generally speaking, we're in the yellows. And then down here in the two colour bars, you can see there's some little decals, and there's two vertical bars, and this is the area of colour in between that is selected, that will be changed when we move any of the sliders. And then these are the fall off areas to these little triangles at the end. And so when I move a slider now, we're looking at just changing the yellows. So we can see now if I move the hue slider, I'm just targeting the yellows in the image. Okay, let's have a little look at the reds. Well, there is going to be reds over this area, but I'm just trying to see if we can just make an adjustment of what's happening in that tree. And you can see that bush, we're specifically targeting those reds in that image. Okay, we are affecting the reds in the outside of the image, but what we can do is basically we can tailor the exact area that we are changing. Let's have another look at that. That's a little bit better. We're just taking, now we're just attacking those reds, and we can see that these are changing. So what we need to do, let's bring it closer to here. So we're just targeting those particular reds in here. Let's try that now. So we can see now that we've now narrowed that range of colour that we're affecting by the reds. So basically, if we change all that now, it's making very little difference to anything else in the image but the reds, which is what we targeted in this actual bush here. Now, if you get things wrong and you want to reset everything to where you started, down here on the bottom of the layers panel, there are some options. There's this first one here is if we want to make what's called a clipping mask. This one is, if we press and hold, we can view the before and after, where we've been and where we. So the last state we had was the monotone, and this is where we are now. And if you want to reset, then you can click this button, and that will reset everything to the last state, which was obviously the monotone image. And then we've got this little eye here where we can switch off the adjustment altogether, because this adjustment now is sitting above the original image, so we're not harming the original image at all. And this image we can switch it on and off, or if we want we can throw it in the bin. So it's an absolutely fantastic non-destructive method of working with adjustment layers. Now lastly but not leastly, we have a mask. And here it is, and if I click on it I can activate it. Now this is a white reveal all mask, and what this is doing is showing us everything that this adjustment is doing, which is, if we look at the adjustment, as we've said, it's making like a sepia tone. So we've got colorize tick, so it's colorizing, and we've changed the sliders to give us like a browny area tone. Okay, so that's what this reveal all mask is showing us. But if we paint with black on this mask, we can actually cut through this to actually see the image underneath. Let me just move that out of the way. And to do this, I'm going to make sure I've got my brush tool active, which is, you can click in the tool panel, or you can press the B key. I need to make sure that black is my foreground colour, which in this case it is, but if it's not, if you press the D key to reset it and then the X key to toggle, you'll get black for your foreground colour. Then we need a brush that is about that big, something like that. Well, I think it's about 200 pixels with a soft edge on the brush. And now I'm going to try and paint this red from this little bush back in again. So if I start painting now, you'll see that I'm now selecting and painting the red from underneath. Now I'm not painting with red. What I'm doing is I'm cutting a hole in the mask, and if I release the key, you'll see that where there's black on the mask, I'm seeing through to the layer underneath, which is of course red, because that's what the colour is. So I can now make a nice colour pop image by just pulling through all those red tones from underneath. I'll just keep doing it till I get what I think is a finished product. Let's just turn the layer on and off, and I'll just have a look. Oh, no, I've missed some, so I'll just keep going in this bit here. There's some red, and then that bit there. in that bit. Have I missed any more? Let's have a look. That's, oh yeah, there's a bit down there, so I'll just paint in down there a little. And that don't look bad actually. So I've now just painted through the mask, and if I look at the mask, if I want to hold the Alt key down and click, I get a full preview of the mask. And you can still paint in your little bits in here if you wanted. If you were not quite in the right place, you could paint in here. And then I'm going to click Alt and click on the mask again to put it back. And there you can see that I've used my mask to cut a hole in this mask, and I can see through to the red underneath. So if I do that, I've not actually painted with red, I'm just showing the red underneath. And if I wanted, I could go further and paint in and pull some of these greens out in these pots here. And probably this one as well. You see where I'm going. Masks are absolutely great for use with adjustment layers, and you get one free with each one. So where have we got to? Well, we found that the colour can be made up of hue and saturation and lightness, and we can control with the hue, saturation and lightness adjustment each one individually. Now hue is the colour, so red is a hue, blue is a hue, green is a hue. Saturation, this is the amount of colour. Is it a not very vibrant colour, or is it a really vibrant colour? And then the lightness, we can change how dark or light the colour is. Well, that about wraps up our conversation on the hue, saturation and lightness adjustment layer. I do hope you enjoyed it. If you did, give me a thumbs up or leave a comment under the video. And even better, if you get a minute, click that subscribe button and help me to grow my Photoshop learning community. I'll see you in the very next video. Bye for now.